what lies beyond is a fascinating journey of Alice in Wonderland, who travels through a large-scale project, the way you travel through fairy tales. I titled this video Stakeholder Engagement Models, or Eastern European Wisdom from Childhood Fables, because Alice, indeed, will visit two famous fairy tales and extract valuable knowledge about stakeholder engagement. To make it more entertaining, we'll rewind back to childhood, to kindergarten specifically. Alice first enters the ancient Russian story of a giant turnip. There once grew a giant turnip in a vegetable garden. Grandpa tried to pull it out, but couldn't do it by himself. He called Grandma. They tried to pull it out together, but that didn't help. They called their granddaughter. Again, even the three of them didn't manage to make it bulge. They called the dog, and then the cat, and still it was difficult to move the turnip out of the soil. So then, in desperation, they called the little mouse. And now, Grandpa was pulling on the turnip, and then Grandma, the granddaughter, the dog, the cat, and the mouse, and finally, they managed to pull it out. What does the turnip represent? Well, in older times, the turnip was an important delivery. The turnip is a piece of work that needs to be delivered or moved out of the soil, as the case may be. How many stakeholders are needed to achieve this? Well, one thing I can say for sure, Russian wisdom on delivery management goes way back, because this giant turnip tale is centuries old and still used on projects, but often mostly in reverse, from the mouse to the grandpa, rather than starting with grandpa, then ending with the mouse, or maybe meeting halfway. Let's illustrate it with a super simplistic example. A tester finds a serious issue with a piece of code, which is communicated to the test lead, who escalates to the Scrum Master, who then escalates to the technical director, who then escalates further. The Russian solution was genius. Whenever you want to deliver a big piece of work, strong stakeholders should get involved, then move down the line of power, physically imagined, until a small mouse, i.e. you or me, will tip the balance and the delivery of the turnip will happen. Top down, bottom up, which one works better? A combination of the two? While we are at it, we should probably track down the number of external dependencies we can juggle to meet a tight deadline. It is unrealistic to expect to deliver within a tight deadline when more than a certain number of external dependencies are there. And here I will introduce Alice to another Eastern European tale. The crab, the pike, and a frog. The crab, the pike, and a frog were trying one day to move from shore to the pond a bag full of grain. Crab was pulling sideways, frog was jumping high, pike erratically rises, bag not moving. Why? Now what do we have here? Again, an important deliverable, a bag of grain. And three stakeholders all pulling in different directions. The frog is jumping, the crab is pulling sideways, the pike erratically rises. It doesn't seem to be a very coordinated, collaborative effort. I mapped these three characters to three stakeholder engagement models: the pyramid, the shell, and the onion. Let's examine each model. The pyramid stakeholder engagement model. It involves pull communications with low influence and low interest stakeholders, push communications with low influence but probably higher interest stakeholders, consultation with higher influence but probably not the highest level of interest of stakeholders, then participation, higher influence, slightly higher interest stakeholders, and then partnership with high influence and high interest stakeholders. You can see that being at the top of the pyramid is investing time wisely. It will probably require more effort but fewer stakeholders to either reach a partnership or maybe a participation or a consultation type of engagement. However, a lot of people decide to go for the least amount of effort. They engage a lot of stakeholders and communicate in a pull and push format. This power interest grid is another way to visualize the same pyramid. So we have the level of interest on the x-axis and the power of the stakeholder on the y-axis. So when there is low interest and low power, it requires minimal effort from our side. When the interest is high, but the power or the influence is low, we keep those specific stakeholders informed. When the interest level is low, but the stakeholder has high influence or power, we need to be mindful that we need to keep them satisfied. And the most important, when there is a high level of interest and a high level of power, we realize and are mindful that these particular stakeholders are key players. However, be aware that these levels of interest and power are not set in stone. They can change for different stakeholders at different times. Now onto the shell model of stakeholder engagement. There are 4 phases. We explore and engage stakeholders. Then we build relationships and we formalize them. Then we implement and evaluate. We do lessons learned. And then we develop further and replicate the good lessons learned. Now onto the onion stakeholder engagement model, which looks a little bit like the scales of a fish. The middle of the onion, closer to the center, to the core, contains the key players and those who need to be informed, like the project managers, the business analysts, the architects. The next layer would be the users and the administrators. And then further up would be subject matter experts and executives. And the most external layer would be the competitors, the customers, the suppliers, and the regulators. You can see that across this onion there will be players who will need to be informed and others who will need to be satisfied, and yet others who have a low level of interest altogether. We have to cut across the onion structure. It might make you cry, but you knew to expect it, right? What wisdom will Alice extract from these 3 models of stakeholder engagement: the pyramid, the shell, and the onion stakeholder engagement? You can see that really all 3 models, along with this power interest grid, are giving out the same message. Be mindful, find the right stakeholders and engage with them in the right way. And then you'll be able to deliver the bag of grain. So, will Alice be able to help the frog, the crab, and the pike for a successful delivery?